innocent baby, deliberately made to feel terrified by scientists, and then abandoned in that exact state of fear with no one ever trying to fix what they had done. This isn't a horror movie. This isn't fiction. This is a real experiment conducted inside a university on a real human child. And the darkest part? To this day, no one is completely certain what happened to that child afterward. Whether he grew up carrying that fear for the rest of his life, or whether he even lived long enough to grow up at all.
His name, or at least the name history gave him, was Little Albert. And what scientists did to him would go on to change psychology forever. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why this experiment is considered completely unethical and banned today, what really happened to this child, and how his story quietly shaped the way psychologists study the human mind even in 2026. If dark psychology, human behavior, and disturbing true experiments fascinate you, hit subscribe now, because this channel keeps digging up real stories that mainstream media never touches. Let's get into it. To understand Little Albert, we first need to understand the man who created him, John B. Watson. In the early 1900s, Watson was one of the most ambitious psychologists in America. He was obsessed with one radical idea: that human beings are not born with fixed personalities or emotions. Instead, he believed everything, fear, love, anger, ambition, is entirely learned through experience. In 1913, Watson made a claim so bold it shocked the entire scientific community. He said, "Give me a dozen healthy infants, and I'll guarantee to train any one of them to become anything I choose."
Watson claimed he could train any child to become a doctor, an artist, a criminal, or a person consumed by fear, regardless of their background. This idea became known as behaviorism, a school of thought that would dominate psychology for decades. But claims like that need proof, and Watson was determined to get it, no matter the cost. But here's the disturbing part. The subject Watson chose to prove his theory wasn't an adult who volunteered. It was a baby who had no way to say no. In 1920, at Johns Hopkins University, Watson teamed up with Rosalie Rayner. Together, they selected their subject, a healthy, calm, and completely innocent 9-month-old baby, whom history would come to know only as Little Albert. In the beginning, researchers simply observed him. They showed him a white rat, a rabbit, a dog, a monkey, cotton wool, and even burning newspaper. Albert reacted to almost none of it with fear. He was a naturally curious, easygoing child who reached out and played with whatever was placed in front of him. Then, the real experiment began. Every single time Albert reached out to touch the white rat, Watson struck a steel bar with a hammer. The sudden, ear-splitting clang was so shocking that Albert would immediately burst into tears, his whole body flinching in fear. This pairing, rat, then loud noise, was repeated again and again, week after week. What you've heard so far was only the setup. What happened next is the part that turned this into one of the most infamous experiments in scientific history. A few weeks into the experiment, something remarkable and deeply disturbing happened. Researchers now showed Albert just the white rat, with no loud noise at all. And still, Albert broke down crying, desperately trying to crawl away. His brain had permanently rewired itself. It no longer needed the loud noise to feel afraid. The mere sight of the rat was now enough to trigger pure terror. This is classical conditioning, except this time, the subject was a human infant. But then came the twist that shocked even Watson himself. Albert's fear didn't stay limited to the rat. It began to spread to the rabbit, to the dog, to a fur coat, to cotton wool, and even to a Santa Claus mask with a fluffy white beard. Psychologists call this stimulus generalization, when a learned fear expands beyond its trigger. A baby who once fearlessly played with anything soft and white was now terrified of nearly everything soft, white, and furry. But here's the part that turns disturbing into genuinely disturbing. What Watson did next, or more accurately, what he never did, is why psychologists still talk about this case with anger, even today. Watson and Rayner never reversed the fear they had created. There was no follow-up therapy, no attempt at deconditioning, no effort to undo what had been done to a child who never consented to any of it. Shortly after, Albert's mother removed him, and he simply disappeared.
For nearly a century, his true identity remained a mystery. Decades later, researchers dug into hospital records and believed they'd found him, a boy named Douglas Merritt, who tragically died young from an unrelated illness, possibly never freed from the fear planted in his mind. Later, other researchers challenged this finding, suggesting the real little Albert may have actually been a man named William Barger, who lived a long, seemingly ordinary life, though whether he ever remembered or carried that early conditioned fear remains unknown. To this day, the debate isn't fully settled. The Little Albert experiment left behind a legacy far bigger than one child's story. It proved human fear can be artificially created, becoming a foundational case study in behaviorism. But just as importantly, it became a warning. Today, every psychological study involving humans must pass through strict ethics review boards, requiring informed consent and protection from harm. Little Albert helped build those ethical guardrails worldwide. If this story made you stop and think, smash that like button and comment below. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell for more real, deeply researched stories. Take care.